There's a saying somewhere that no place is forbidden. You just don't know how to get inside that place. Of course, the person who said this probably learned his lesson now, or worse. Today, we're going to check forbidden places and the consequences some people had when they entered it. Imagine wanting to hire a boat to take you to an island. You approach boatman, but upon hearing the name of the island, the boatman suddenly looked nervous. You hear them murmuring in a different language from your own, but one eventually agrees to take you. After all, you're paying good cash for the transaction. The wind is strong. The sky is dark, but you don't mind those. You're either an author, a journalist, or a content creator wanting to do research. But upon approaching the island, the boatman becomes pale, tugging on his collar. "You do know what you're doing, right?" he says. And smiling back, you nod and get off the boat. By then, you smell the looming rain, so you want to get to shelter. But there are overgrowths all over the place. Wary of the rain, you try to find a building, and upon seeing one, you give a small celebratory grin. But thunder claps overhead, and there's no clear path to the rickety building. That's when you see a tube-like machine where you can duck and enter through. Upon entering, your shoes clang on the metal. The tube you're walking in is not that long, or big. At the back of your mind, you have a suspicion but don't think about it much. Finally, you're inside the building, only to realize that it's a hospital. This time, you know exactly what for. After all, among many reasons, you went to the island to see its mental ward. You look around at the run-down place now. This island hadn't been used for decades, so everything's falling off. You walk around, making notes to yourself when you hear footsteps behind you. Thinking it's the boatman, you turn around, not seeing anyone. You sigh a little and continue walking around. A long stretch of hallway is in front of you now. Outside, rain begins to pour, but you don't mind it. You know you're safe inside. But then thunder breaks, and with it, you hear squeaking. Fearing it's a big rat, you stare at the end of the hallway. But then the squeaking grows louder and louder, making you recognize the sound. A wheelchair coming straight your way. The problem is you can't see anyone or anything approaching. That's when you begin to run back to the metal tube where you first made your way in. You're now certain that it's not just any tube, it's a rusted cremator, or what used to be a cremator that burned down bodies of dead people before. Getting outside, you hear the bell tower ringing from the distance, only to remember in your research that the bell from the island had been removed years ago. You dash straight back to the overgrowths, past the dead-infested soil, going to the boatman who is waiting for your return. These are just some of the experiences of people who go to Poveglia Island, either with permission from the municipality or not. But why would the Poveglia Island be considered a haunted place? Aside from the visitor stories, it has largely to do with its sad history. Located between Lido and Venice, Poveglia is also known as the Plague Island. Let's go back to the 14th century to understand more about this place. During that time, a war broke out, and original inhabitants from the island relocated. This caused the island to be abandoned for years. By the 18th century, the island was put into use once more as a customs control. Simply put, ships would dock on the island for checking. But by 1793, 2 ships that docked on the island had passengers that had the plague. And if you're still not familiar with plagues, well, let's just say that the disease spreads quickly and results in a lot of death. Because the ships that docked on Poveglia Island contained plague victims, they made the island into a quarantine zone. Since then, plague victims from other nearby places would be sent there. It is said that more than 100,000 plague victims died on the island. With so many, how would authorities even get rid of the bodies? One way was for them to burn the bodies in cremators. Another one was this thing they called plague pits. In the plague pit, facilitators just buried dead piling bodies in the ground. The cremators, at present, although not functional anymore, are still on the island, sometimes serving as entrances to the hospital. But that wasn't the end of the island. There were still uses to the place. Years after the plague died down, it was converted into a mental facility. This added to the list of horrors. According to rumors, an evil doctor took charge of the asylum and performed experimental lobotomies to the patients. These patients complained of seeing ghosts that died from the plague, but of course, the doctor said that they were just experiencing mental sickness. And so he supposedly continued these sick experiments to make the patients better. It only ended when the doctor himself experienced ghost hauntings, driving him to jump from the bell tower. After that, the island traded hands, but continued its state of decay. It became too unsafe to go to, so you would need a special permit to even enter. But one thing is for sure, even if you manage to get on it, you'll be spooked. This next story happened in 1953, the time when Queen Elizabeth II was crowned. But you're not part of the procession. Imagine your name is Maria Poimenidou. You're 22 years old and lead a simple life. You're quite ambitious and a little bit devious. But the scariest thing about you is that you see your plan through, no matter how evil. Going somewhere? Your mother might ask one night. No, I'm staying. In fact, I'm sleeping now. You might answer her back. But little does she know that under your bed, bundled in your black bag, is a secret. For that, you have to wait until your mother falls asleep. Now, since this is a sprinkle of fiction grounded in what really happened, we don't know when Maria, or in this case you, left the house. Let's say it's close to dawn the next morning. Getting your bag, you slip from the house and close the door. But as you move farther away from your home, you grow more excited, especially when you take a ride going to the harbor. As soon as you get off the ride, there's confusion though. The driver turns to you. Hey, where did that woman go? What woman? You might answer. He looks you up and down, noting your mustache and the suit you're now wearing, and shakes his head. But you're already heading to the small boat that would take you to your destination. A boatman is standing on the dock, along with a small group of other men as you approach. Are we complete? You might ask. You're the last one. The boatman hands you a piece of paper, a ticket, and barely looking at you, he speaks to the others. Absolutely no women allowed. Or else. You climb aboard. Since then, you're never seen again. Ever. I'm just kidding. You were, or Maria, was arrested just days after that. After all, it's forbidden for women to go to Mount Athos where she went. But why would Maria have to go through the trouble of dressing as a man just to enter Mount Athos? Let's give a background of this holy place in Greece to understand. You see, according to legends, the Virgin Mary was sailing to visit Cyprus when her ship veered off course. She and her small crew were forced to dock at Athos to get their bearing. When Virgin Mary went to the shore, she was impressed by how beautiful the place was and asked her son, who we all know as Jesus Christ, to bless the place. And if legends were to be believed, as soon as Virgin Mary asked that, a voice was heard saying that from then on, Athos was considered to be Mary's inheritance and garden. Since then, the place was declared sacred by the locals. But more than that, no other woman can go to the mountain. The rules on Athos was so strict that even female animals weren't allowed, at first, so the monks were forced to import eggs, milk, and cheese. But as time passed, the monks declared that wild female animals were allowed on the mountain, as well as female cats, so there wouldn't be rat infestations. As for Maria, well, I said she was arrested. At least a newspaper article about her at the time mentioned her trespassing. But no one knows what truly happened behind closed doors. Perhaps they released her with a slap on the wrist. Perhaps even more. If you enjoyed this kind of documentary storytelling, then please tell us your thoughts.